All right, let's go ahead and move on to another totally not fraught and difficult conversation about abortion. And
but really the best example of what we've been talking about, Krystal, and this entire conversation about, this is one of the best examples of where this is potentially a vulnerability for Republicans and potentially, especially for the Trump-Vance situation.
Right. So Vance in particular, he voted against the IVF bill that went through the Senate. He was spoken in favor of some sort of national, whether it's an abortion ban or quote unquote federal response to deal with abortion tourism. He's been out there on the issue in a way that is uncomfortable for Trump and not where Trump wants to position himself. We already know Democrats are going to make this a key issue because it's been successful for them in the post-Roe environment, in special elections, et cetera. Let's put this up on the screen. This is just a report about how Kamala Harris plans to lean into abortion. And I think it's fair to say is a much more credible and much more comfortable messenger on the issue who, as opposed to Joe Biden, who is himself personally Catholic and personally pro-life. And I know you guys will probably object to that characterization, but that's how he would describe himself and has been on the side of pro-life positions at times in his career. So he's not really all in on the issue, wasn't comfortable talking about it. I think Kamala Harris's gender is an asset here as well. Just off the top, and Inez, how do you think that this issue plays in the election? And also, what do you make of the Trump campaign's clear moves to basically push abortion to the side, take it out of the RNC platform, just say we're leaving it to the states and that's that. We're not going to do anything at the federal level. Do you think that those efforts are good, and do you think that will be successful?
So first of all, these are the problems of victory, right? Because what happened when Dobbs came down is there was a very large and obvious separation between what Republican elected officials were telling their voters, their most enthusiastic voters in fundraising emails, and first of all, what they were willing to do as a party. And second of all, there was a gap between what they were telling those voters and where the country ended up being on the issue. That's, more, probably relevant than the first, but it split that open. So before, the Republican Party could comfortably use pro-life rhetoric, as sort of all the way to the wall as hard rhetoric as they wanted, because they had no power to do anything about the issue. And I do think this is and I know Rachel has many, many examples of this in the Senate from her years in the Senate, right? But this is the classic sort of virtue signaling politics issue where you have politicians who are able to say things exactly because that their base is liked, exactly because they had no power and no intent of doing anything about it. And that's just very irritating. So, and I do think that applies to the second part of your question as well, which is how to deal with the fact that the Republican Party, the dominant position in the Republican Party base on this issue, on abortion, is increasingly isolated in the country. It's a minority position, right? But it's very strongly and sincerely felt by the large part of the Republican base, right? So how to deal with that? And again, I'm not good in answering these questions in terms of politics. I do, however, think that there is a certain insincerity that is always picked up when you just try to sidestep questions. And I would prefer to see Republicans in general take this on in an honest and sincere and head-on way and say simply, look, I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this issue. I myself am, by the way, a moderate on abortion, but I know that a lot of people are going to be disagreeing with me on this issue. Here's why I hold the position that this is the difference between leadership and just, putting your finger in the wind and following whatever is most popular in the polls. And I think that insincerity actually does come through. And I think it makes people mistrust the rest of what you say. I think the average person,
Vance's
again, maybe I'm wrong.
Comment. So, yeah, Inez, J.D. Vance went on one of the Sunday shows before he was picked as VP. He was obviously in as a contender and kind of flip-flopped on the abortion drug mifepristone, sent alarm bells across the pro-life movement. And I agree with you. I think that makes people distrust you and distrust your sincerity on other issues, let alone that issue. Is there something particular you think about abortion that's most dangerous for a J.D. Vance to adopt a Trumpian tack, I should say, now that he's on the ticket and basically has to?
Yeah, I'm really not sure if there's a good way for him to tack here without appearing insincere. And I think maybe the best way to talk about it would be just to be very honest and say, these are my views. I know they're not held by the majority of the country. They're not even held by my running mate. They're not part of our policy agenda for the presidency. But here's why I believe what I believe. I'm going to be honest with you. I know that most of you won't agree with me. I think that's actually a more, I don't know, as an American voter, as a citizen, I'd rather be talked to that way, even assuming on an issue that I very much disagree with someone on, than to be gaslit and sort of misled. And I just don't think it comes off very well. And I think it just makes you lose credibility on other issues when you're not honest about, things where you can easily pull up, 500 clips of you saying a particular thing, right? It just comes off. I think it damages your credibility in other issues not to be honest. And then to also be honest about the fact that you have realistic expectations about how much of those views of yours are likely to be enacted through the political process because the majority of the country disagrees with you.
Rachel, as a social conservative, I've been really actually curious to talk to you about how you felt about these issues clearly being, which I know you care a lot about, clearly being intentionally sidelined by the Republican Party.
Well, I think Inez has sort of distilled this correctly. This issue has been protected from politics for 50 years, right? It's been protected by judicial fiat. Neither party has had to actually engage it as a political matter in the political process. And they become almost two separate questions at this point. How, in terms of the morality of the issue, which drives a lot of how Republicans feel about this. I'm a pro-life Catholic. So is J.D. Vance. I have thoughts about how Joe Biden presents himself on this issue that I will leave to the side for this moment. But, how we have to now engage the political process almost at a state by state level, which is the position that Donald Trump has frankly taken. And I don't think we can jump to the end and say, now we have to impose, our end goal on everyone without doing the work first, to Inez's point. I don't think you can moderate on this question if you are, someone who is pro-life for the very reason that you believe human life begins at conception. There's no moderating on that point. Be honest about it, but also be honest about the fact that we live in a country where these decisions are decided politically. I personally think our pro-life movement on the right has to sort of re-architect itself, and they aren't doing this, right? They're continuing this federal push for all these federal policies, when in reality, I think there's a sequencing element here. You have to go make your case. You have to persuade people at a very granular level before you can get to where you say you want to go. They're not rebuilding themselves that way. So I think we have a real disconnect. And it's why the pro-life movement keeps losing around the country, because they aren't actually going and doing the work. So, this is a generational quest, I think. It's not like suddenly Roe falls and, it's like Roe falls, ? Abortion ban. Like, that's not how it works. That's not how the politics of this work at all. And I think you're kind of seeing the Trump campaign grapple with that reality.
Rachel, what do you think of the potency of the issue come November? Because I have to tell you, I mentioned before, I lived in Kentucky. We were talking about Andy Beshear. Democrats in Kentucky were getting killed on the issue of abortion for years, right? This was, Republicans really took control of the state. One of the key issues that they used was abortion in a state that is very religious. And so it was quite shocking to me to see the way that Andy Beshear was able to run affirmatively on his pro-choice position. And it was a tremendous asset to him. He ran it out. I'm sure you saw the young girl who was raped, and he said, Daniel Cameron would force her to bear her rapist baby. It was a devastating ad. And to see that flip in Kentucky, to me, was wild. I would not have predicted that the politics on the issue, even in a state like Kentucky, would flip so quickly. The question is, does it remain so salient? Clearly, Donald Trump wants to, push it off to the side and make other issues more of the focus, immigration in particular, or the economy and inflation as well. Do you think that is possible for him to, or does this continue to be a highly salient and important issue?
It's honestly hard for me to say. I think it's going to be something the Trump campaign is going to have to grapple with, because Democrats are going to make them. But I don't think that, on the right, Donald Trump has already decided how he's going to handle this. And people can agree or disagree with it, but how he's determined it is he's, basically saying the traditional Republican position on this has been, we are pro-life. From Donald Trump's perspective, we have exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother in our abortion policy. End of story. That's how Republicans are comfortable talking about it. I think that's what you're going to continue to see from his campaign. Now, the pro-life movement, I think, has a different perspective that they need to rebuild on this front. I don't think you're going to that is a years-long process. I don't think you're going to see that come out in this campaign. I do think Democrats are going to continue to make abortion a centerpiece. However, I do think if Donald Trump doubles down on his economic arguments, if he doubles down on, life being difficult for, middle-class families, talks about open borders in that vein, I think Democrats are going to have a hard time continuing to say the only thing that matters in this, this campaign is Donald Trump's going to make your 9-year-old, get an abortion or not get an abortion if she gets pregnant. I don't think that resonates too far when you're dealing with kind of kitchen table issues.
Well, you guys, I shouldn't say guys, I'm sorry. You ladies, this has been a riveting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on today's edition of Counterpoints. We appreciate your insight.
Great to see you both. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Krystal, it's always so fun to have you, to co-host with you, and it's always so much fun to have you to bounce kind of ideas and arguments against. So appreciate you joining the show today.
It was my pleasure. This was a fun one. I like that we leaned into the lady power. So
yeah, yes. Next time we'll have all men. I guess we'll have 2 guys on. We'll do like white dudes for Kamala, or we'll do like maybe we should do it differently. We should do like black women for Trump.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
we could do that.
Opposite.
Yeah, I like that. That would be a little bit of I can't like off the top of my head think of who that would be. We'll come up with it. Candace Owens, maybe she can join us.
We can get Sagar to figure that out, and we'll make it happen. All right.
Thank you, Emily.
Of course, and everyone don't forget BP Free 1 over at breakingpoints.com for a free 30-day trial of Breaking Points Premium. We appreciate you watching. I'll be back here with Ryan next week for another edition of Counterpoints. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Krystal will be back here with Sagar tomorrow. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.